Happy Disability Pride Month, everyone. My name is Nico Meyering. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a white man with swept to the side blonde hair, large dark glasses. I'm wearing a light blue t-shirt and I'm seated in front of a purple background. I am honored today to be joined by my friend Ariana. Ariana, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Ariana. I am a white female. I use the pronouns she and her, and I am wearing a bright blue band in my long red hair, and I'm seated in front of a couple of windows, so it's very bright in the background. I'm wearing glasses as well.
That's all right. Ariana, what does disability pride mean to you?
This is something that I am still kind of learning myself. But when I think about the terminology disability pride, it encompasses learning to accept the full self, and understanding that there might be nuances or differences about you than the able-bodied community, but you are still a valid person, and that is something to be proud of. And again, this is something I'm still learning.
I think we're all continually on a journey to learn more about ourselves and to accept ourselves. And the late disabled poet Laura Hershey has a poem called "You Get Proud by Practicing."
Yeah.
Which is exactly what Disability Pride Month is about, at least like in my perspective at this current moment.
Yes, that makes, yes, practicing absolutely hits the mark for me. I'm definitely doing that.
We always claim progress rather than perfection.
Exactly.
Ariana, what is one thing you want non-disabled people, let's say, to know about disability life?
To know about disability life and the individuals in life, that we are still valid human beings and that these lives are still valuable lives. I feel that there's a lot of the able-bodied community does have a tendency to ignore us and the lives that we live, and I need it to be, I need us to be seen and heard, and for the able-bodied community to understand that just because somebody has a different ability than you, then does not make them less than. It does not make us less than. So yeah.
That's a really good point. I feel like very often, and perhaps people with visible disabilities get this more often than folks like me with an invisible disability, but folks see disability as not the lack of capacity, but a lack of capability, which is not the case.
It's not the case. It's not the case at all. And for you and I who have invisible disabilities, when those disabilities do come to light, it's shocking to able-bodied people. And then they start viewing us in a very different way and treating us in ways that they didn't before. It could even be years down the road and they're like, oh, I didn't know you had this. You are different now. I just want them to understand that's not the case. I'm still the same person I was, that you knew weeks, months, or years ago. This just happens to be a part of who I am. So.
Yeah, absolutely. We're all different people all throughout our lives. So it's difficult to realize that some people want to define you and pigeonhole you and then never move you from like that one particular space. And that does a disservice to the person that you have become since they knew you, right?
Yes,
and all the versions of yourself that you will become.
Exactly.
When I talked about my disability for the first time to some classmates in elementary school or to some adults in my young adulthood, I guess I inadvertently, or they took it to sound very scary, and they reacted in a way that made it seem like they were very scared of me, or at least found my existence and experience to be daunting almost. So one thing I've heard, and one thing that I've heard other disabled people tell me they've heard, is an able-bodied person saying like, oh, if I had your life, if I had your difficulties, I'd probably kill myself, or I wouldn't know what to do.
Know what to do, right?
And that's difficult to hear because like, I mean, I didn't know what to do when I got diagnosed right out of the womb. Like my parents didn't know what to do, but we did the only thing that there was to do, which is keep living and navigate life and exist in a world that inherently isn't built for us, right? And find ways to exist and thrive and be innovative and be creative and be resourceful.
Yes.
So that's tough. I mean, disability isn't the worst thing in the world, right? There's a lot of things that I would consider, at least, much worse than having my disability. Like, I don't know, having your house burned down and losing all your possessions. That's really terrible. Having your parents pass away or your spouse pass away. That's terrible. Living with a disability is not terrible.
It's not.
So there's definitely like a disconnect there that needs to be smoothed over, and the work needs to be done from able-bodied people as well as disabled people.
Yes, the allyship between the disabled and the able-bodied community needs to strengthen in some ways so that the narrative and the rhetoric can change. Because to your point, the able-bodied people, they not only don't see us once that disability, like for you and I, come forth, but like you said, they become afraid, they don't know how to act. And we're not invaluable, we're not less than because we have this. In fact, we've had to work harder to get the things in our lives than anyone else has because of our barriers and the obstacles that we've overcome. And I think that needs to be applauded instead of feared and looked down on. But yeah, I wish the able-bodied community had more allyship and understanding. And I know that some of that labor will be ours to own, to kind of shape that education and narrative and pass it along. But I do wish that the able-bodied people, when they see disabled individuals, wouldn't have that stark reaction, that fear, that shock, that awkwardness. And it just, I understand to a certain extent, you don't know how to approach somebody with a disability. Is what you're going to say going to be triggering to someone, or is it going to be insensitive because you've lived your whole life without a disability, so you don't really know how to be? And I understand there's going to be some nuances and some trepidation in that sense, but yeah, I do wish that the narrative would change.
Entirely valid. What are some lessons that being disabled has taught you, Ariana?
It's taught me how to reach out for help, and that asking for help is not a sign of incapability and weakness. It's actually a sign of strength for me to be vulnerable in that way and ask for the help that I need. I have a tendency to just, because my disability isn't, my disabilities, plural, are invisible, I tend to try to play the role of an able-bodied person. And in that role, I'm not allowed to ask for help because I need to prove that I can do it on my own. And so the biggest takeaway, the biggest lesson that I've learned over the years, decades, is to ask for help, and it's actually a strength. It's not a weakness. And I've also learned, again, how to be proud and step into that space of being a prideful disabled person, and that the word disability is not slanderous. It's not an evil word. It's just speaking to your other ability. You don't have the same abilities, or you have different abilities as someone else. It doesn't make me less of a human being. And so again, I'm still learning a lot of this. It's still a space that's kind of new to me. My comfort zone was ignoring myself and my disabilities. So a lot of what I'm speaking about, I'm speaking internally as someone who tried to be an able-bodied person despite everything that was going on. Yeah.
Valid. Well, I'm so glad that you're now able to show up for yourself.
Yes. Yeah. That's probably the biggest takeaway from this, showing up for myself. You hit the nail on the head. Yeah.
Thank you. I also often wonder, like, so we here in the US, our whole nation was built upon this concept of independence and liberty. And to a large extent, that's completely valid and good. But it's also possible that, we are also interdependent. We all rely upon each other in the communities that we form. And we see this in social groups. We see this in how we structure our government, local, state, federal, and the services that we access in terms of like roads that we use. If we use a bus to get to work in the morning, that's relying on some other person.
Yep.
So interdependence isn't a bad thing, just like independence and interdependence can coexist. I wonder if like this need to be independent and need to ignore your disabilities exists to the same extent it does here in other nations. And that's, I guess, for me to find out.
Yeah, having lived in Spain,
Mhm.
I think, and I've traveled extensively, it's like part of my identity. I did pick up on community. So in the US, I feel like the sense of community is very different. There's a stark contrast between our sense of community here in the US
Mhm.
and the sense of community, at least for Spain. I'll speak for Spain because I lived there for over 2 years. And I think human beings in their innate nature is to be connected. We're built for connection. And I think that you see that in other countries that I visited. I saw that in Spain. You walk down the street and no one's a stranger. And so that interweb of connection, it inherent in that is the interdependence that you're talking about. It takes a village to raise people, and they don't let you go after adulthood. You're with these people for life. It's this, kind of womb around you, and you're always going to have support. And I just don't think in the US I see that lacking a bit. And so while we do have like bus systems, I know here in Austin it's kind of not existent. But in the major metropolises we have, great public transportation that mirrors like, New York City or San Francisco, places like that. And so the community at large, but if you go from a macro more into a micro level on that, it does become a little nuanced and more like we set up, like to your point, it's more of you've got to be super independent, and asking for help is a little difficult. I think when I was in Spain, it was less of me having to reach out and ask for help. It was like more, it was there. It was
Mhm.
already available because people would see a need and just already be there to help. So it's a little,
Right. When those access options were provided to you preemptively,
yeah.
did that make it easier to access because you didn't have to make the request?
I think
Or
so. I think
okay.
so. Because at the time that I lived in Spain, I still was trying to fill that able-bodied space and
Oh,
ignore my
okay.
own disabilities. And so not having to not having to reach out and ask for that help, it kind of kept me in that able-bodied space because I didn't have to realize, wow, I need the help. It was already there preemptively, if that makes sense. Like now being here and realizing, wow, I do need the help. It's not already readily available. I need to go out and look for it and ask for it. It's a very different space.
Yeah. Um, when we create enough barriers to access, people that need that access will give up and will
Yep,
stop seeking it. And that is a
yep,
great injustice to them.
yes. And I have been in that space several times, and I can't even imagine how many people have also.
Yeah.
Very easy to, when you have so many barriers to access the help that you need, to just not ask for it, just give up. And like to your point, it is a very big injustice. And I think it's also dangerous. A lot of times you'll see that impact mental health in ways that are detrimental.
Well, that's true. My last question, Ariana, is what have you had to unlearn as a result of your disabled journey?
I've had to unlearn I've had to unlearn all my able-bodied mindset,
Okay.
which is still, again, a progress because
Sure.
I've had to unlearn that disability is a bad word.
Mm-hmm.
I've had to unlearn that I can do it all on my own. I've had to unlearn asking for help makes me incapable and less than. And I've had to mostly it's all an able-bodied mindset. I feel like that space that I've encompassed has just been, oh, I can do it on my own and I'm not disabled, and just completely ignoring my own disability. Because like for me, when you can't see something, when I can't see that something's right there and tangible, I easily ignore it. And
Right.
back to the point about access to help and those barriers, and a lot of the issues that I'm dealing with, I need a lot of support from doctors. Well, if I don't have the health insurance to get that medical help or to get the medication, then I just don't, and I just encompass that space of I'm fine. I have no disability. It was all in my head, and follow that track. And so I've had to unlearn that even if the help isn't readily available in that sense, like I don't have health insurance or I don't have doctors set up to, be at the ready, I have to find other resources. I have to get creative. I have to not ignore that I have disabilities and pretend like I'm fine. I still have to show up for myself, like you were saying earlier, and take care of myself in ways that I possibly can. Currently, I don't have a doctor, but I was on Amazon Prime, Prime Day, and I was ordering all the supplements that could combat all the symptoms that I'm dealing with, like get this supplement and this is on sale, and I subscribed to I don't know how many reoccurring supplemental, it's just, you have to show up for yourself. If you can't find it in the conventional ways, you have to get unconventional and creative. And I think I've unlearned my learned helplessness, which is something I'm still working on.
That is wonderful to hear. It's been a long time since I heard that term, learned helplessness.
Yeah.
Very valid. Ariana, thank you for your time today. Where can people find you online?
I'm on Facebook, Ariana Francis. You can search me and find me that way. Or Instagram is Ariana Not Grande. But I'm working on my social media presence. Eventually I'll get a TikTok.
Okay. Well, we'll be here for it when you do.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, Ariana. Have a
Thanks
great
for
weekend.
having me. Thank you so much.